Welcome back to One American Baseball Podcast. This is episode 22. It's June 23rd, and we're about a month away from the trade deadline. So we have a little bit of trade deadline talk, at least on Jaden's end, coming up today. And we also have our usual weekly talk, breakdown of each ball club and going around the league and talking about some storylines. So I'm Chris, as always, joined by my co-host Jaden, and welcome on board, Jaden. How you doing?
Chris, I'm doing all right. Last week was a so-so week of baseball, we'll call it for the Reds, but we're still 2 games over 500. I think this team is still in a good space to compete. And like you mentioned, there was some trade deadline news on the Reds side of things that gives me a little bit of hope. But yeah, I'm doing pretty well. I'm still hopeful about this Red season, which about 2 weeks away from the All-Star break is a spot that I usually am not with this team. So that's nice at least.
Yeah, they're stringing you along for a little bit longer than usual this season. I believe the Guardians and the Reds have the same record. The
Yeah.
Guardians are 39 and 37.
Yeah,
Um,
so are the Reds.
yeah,
Or we
that's
might have 40 wins now. I think we have the same win percentage though, is the
okay.
thing.
So
Yeah,
yeah, two
something
very,
like
very
that.
similar teams, thanks to the Reds beating up on the Guardians this year. But Jaden, why don't you get into your weekly takeaways here?
Yeah, so my first weekly takeaway was originally not even supposed to be a major league ball club takeaway, but it's about Chase Burns. I was just, going to shout out how good he has looked in the minor leagues and how a guy that I wasn't really excited about when we drafted because I didn't think we needed another pitcher, has really proven me wrong and that he was a really good number two pick. I think a lot of people weren't expecting him to go that high. The Reds got him at number two, and it was a really great pick. And as we've seen in this last week with the injury to Wade Miley, the pitching depth is definitely needed. So I was sort of going back and forth. Is he going to get called up? Is he not going to get called up? I think that was sort of the big talking point the last week around Chase Burns. And the report was that he was on a 120 inning limit this year. He's already thrown 66 innings, so I wasn't expecting to see him in the big leagues this year. A lot of people were saying, if he comes up, it's going to be in September. He's going to be in the bullpen for a potential playoff push. All of that is wrong. Wade Miley got hurt, and now he is starting tomorrow, Tuesday, against the Yankees. So he's our number one prospect. He was the number two overall pick in last year's draft, and I should be excited about this for all of those reasons. But it's really a double-edged sword because it points to um, an issue that this organization has seen time and time again in the past, and that's the inability of the front office to build good organizational pitching depth. And that is forcing them to call these young guys up before they might be ready. You start their clock, and you might hurt their confidence if they get shelled. We saw that with Chase Petty earlier this year. He came up, was expected to make two starts in the big leagues, and both of them were disastrous. And the organization is no longer confident in him. You've seen that time and time again now. Um, we saw that in the Ohio Cup game that you and I were both in attendance for, where Chase Petty was supposed to start. They went with Brent Suter. Brent Suter is the opener, and Petty didn't even pitch that entire game. So there's a lack of confidence from the organization in Petty, and you have to wonder if Petty is unsure of himself because of those performances. We saw this happen with Hunter Green. He had about 2 years where he had to learn in the big leagues how to pitch. Um, and he got rocked for a lot of that time. I mean, it was pretty ugly there for a little bit, and people were wondering, is Hunter Green not what we thought he was going to be? We've seen now these last 2 years that when he's healthy, he is that guy. But for a while there, it didn't look like it. Rhett Lauder, we saw it last year. He got called up very early on in his career. He was drafted in 2023, made his debut in 2024. So, he didn't struggle as bad as Hunter Green did, but we've seen it time and time again where these young guys who haven't spent a lot of time in pro ball have to be called up because we just don't have the depth to prevent this from happening. And you think the front office would learn from that, and apparently they haven't. And I have some more front office complaints that I'll get into later. But Chase Burns has given us as fans a lot of reasons to be confident in him. He's looked way better than advertised for his first season in pro ball. There was worry about home run rate and walk rate when he got drafted. He has a 1.77 ERA in 13 starts across all minor league levels. He has a 167 average against and a .77 whip. He made two starts in AAA before he got the call up, 219 ERA. 171 average against and a .89 whip. So all really good numbers down in the minors. I'm excited to watch him debut, but I'm frustrated that he has to make his debut now. I'm excited to watch him. I'm mad at the front office is sort of what I'm getting at with that.
Yeah, I think I honestly might be a little bit more excited for Chase Burns' debut because I picked up Chase Burns in fantasy. You let me know like before the news like nationally broke that
Yeah.
Chase Burns was coming up, and I immediately picked him up in fantasy. So I was also really early on Jacob Mizorowski of the Brewers, who we're going to talk about later in this episode, but he's been phenomenal so far, and he was a great pickup in fantasy. So. I'm hoping that the same kind of rings true with Chase Burns, but if he blows up, then he's just another replacement guy.
Right.
So yeah, I'm excited to see what he does tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah, me too. I'm not I'd like for it to go well, but I'm playing you in fantasy this week, so
That's
you
true.
know, if it doesn't, I can hang my hat on that at least. Um, but moving on to some of that trade deadline talk that I was mentioning at the top of the show, Ken Rosenthal, he's like a national baseball sort of talking head, said that he expects the Reds to be aggressive at the deadline. Now, that's just one guy saying that, and he's a national baseball guy. I don't know how what source or where he seems to be drawing this information from, but that was the quote I saw. And if it is true, I think it'll be very interesting to see you know what being aggressive looks like from this front office. We've never really seen them be aggressive at a deadline. The last time I can remember something super aggressive at the deadline was the trade for Scott Rowland in 2009. That was the last like big trade line splash that I can really remember this team making. It's been a lot of, you know, no name guys or guys that didn't pan out at the deadline. I mean, there was the Yasiel Puig trade, but that really didn't work out. Things like that. I think there are definitely a couple of pieces that they move for major league talent. One of those guys is Nick Martinez. Nick Martinez is a guy who's really struggled in his last two starts, but I think a team that needs big league pitching will we'll take a chance on Nick Martinez. Hopefully, by the time the trade deadline rolls around, you've got Hunter Green back, and you have the ability to move Nick Martinez. But at the same time, it's tough because you don't really have much pitching depth to begin with, like I just mentioned. So, do you want to move a proven big league starter for something else? I think that's something to weigh as well. I think another thing you can do is move prospects. Is Nick Krall going to be willing to do that? Is the question. He's been a bit of a prospect hugger in his time in Cincinnati as the president of baseball operations. But if we really want to compete in the next couple of years, you need to be willing to move prospects and deal with the consequences when those come. I mean, sure, you might be bad in 5 years' time when you have no one to call up because you traded to really make a push these next couple years. But I think I've said this before on this show, and I'll say it again now. I'm willing to endure a rebuild if this team could be highly competitive for a couple years, like the mid 2010s Royals were. I mean, we saw them make two back-to-back World Series. They won one in 2015, and then it was sort of they faded into irrelevance until sort of last year when they found their groove again. But I think watching this team make a deep playoff run would be worth it, at least for me as a fan. Um, if we have to endure a rebuild, I think uh, this team and this organization needs to see some playoff success, and maybe the only way you're going to do that is to trade prospects, and I think it needs to be done if that is the case.
What about Ellie's career though? Because he's only in Cincinnati for, so many more years.
Right. Well, I think you sort of build the team around him being in Cincinnati for the next few years. Get guys that are under team control for a little bit, or guys that have a little bit longer contracts that you can say will be around for 2 or 3 more years. That'll be around while LA's around. Um, and I think that's really what I would like to see. Um, but I'll get into my next thing here, which is Tony Santillan and his issues within the division when he pitches out of the bullpen. Tony Santillan's been pretty good this year, overall. If you look at his overall stats this year, he's got an ERA of 3.09, 217 average it against. Guys have a 277 on base percentage and a slug of 364. So pretty good numbers, decent numbers. If you look at his appearances against teams outside of our division, his ERA goes down to 1.37. He's got a 167 average against on base percentage of 235 and a slug of 289. So he's an elite reliever if he plays teams outside of our division. Um, However, against teams in our division, his ERA goes up to 8.31. He has a 333 average against, a 372 on base percentage, and a 538 slug. I don't, you know, I don't know what to say other than that's abysmal. um, it was a stat I looked into after he blew up against the Cardinals this weekend, and pretty much lost us the game. He did lose us the game. He took the loss, and he was terrible in the two series we've played against the Cubs. And I don't really have any analysis from this other than maybe
That's
it's
so
just a weird.
frustrating.
It might just be like a weird mental block. I don't know, but it is wild to me how bad he is against teams in our division, and he's so elite against everyone else. um, but maybe we just stop pitching uh, him against teams in our division. I don't know. But on the other side of that, a guy who has been playing well recently is Matt McLain. Since the 14th of this month, he has an average of 393, and on base of 452 and a slug of 679. He has 2 home runs and 5 RBIs in that time, and he's been going the other way a lot. Spencer Steer has been another guy who's been hitting to the opposite field a lot recently, and I think that's an approach that allows you to see more success at the plate. You let the ball get deeper into the zone, you see the ball better, and that improves your quality of contact. Barry Larkin, who's our color commentary guy for home games, talks a lot about you need your approach to be up the middle and the opposite way, to hit the ball well. And seeing these guys start to hit the ball the other way and heat up at the same time, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think, if Matt McLain can really get going, that improves this team a ton, and it makes me feel a lot better about our chances this season as a team that wants to be competitive. And then, the last thing I want to get into is we made quite a few roster moves this past week, and they have some pretty big implications. First of all, Jamer Candelario was returned from his rehab assignment and then DFA'd. Earlier today, the announcement was made that he was DFA'd. Garrett Hampson was also DFA'd to make room on the roster for guys. And I'm not particularly sad to see Candelario go, but I think this is another abject failure of the Nick Krall regime. Um, I think I've seen time and as fans, we've seen time and time again Nick Krall um, fail to do the right thing, and this is another example of that. In Candy's time with the Reds, he played in 134 games. His average was 207, an OPS plus of 76, and he had a WAR of negative 1.6 in that time. He got paid 21 million to do all of that, and we still owe him another 24 million dollars. So we're paying a guy 24 million dollars to not put on a Reds uniform, which is pretty unforgivable for a small market team that doesn't have a lot of money to work with to begin with. It's not like we offloaded this money and we have that money to spend now. We're still spending it on a guy that's not even going to play another inning, another pitch for this team. Um, this move should be the end of Nick Krall's time in Cincinnati, in my personal opinion. I think it's terrible. It's inexcusable, really. I think Nick Kroll has proven time and time again that he can't hack it in the trade and free agent market and that he really has no idea what he's doing. I mean, you look at the trades that he's made up into this point, you look at the free agent signings he's made up into this point. Sure, uh, he's hit a couple this season. Jose Trevino, Gavin Lux, Austin Hayes, I'd say are three decent hits, but he's wasting a lot of money on these free agents that just aren't helping this team much, if at all. Jamer Candelario being the prime example of that. And I get that he's working with a limited budget, um, but if you look at Candelario signed to this team in 2024, and I looked at some guys who signed cheaper contracts for a similar length. Candelario's was 3 years. So these are contracts that were cheaper or around the same price for 3 or 4 years, and all of them were signed in 2024. You had Lourdes Gurriel. He's put up 2.3 WAR since 2024. Jorge Soler, who has zero point 0.6 WAR, but he had a 133 OPS plus in 24. His defense sort of hurts him in the WAR um, stat, but he's a pretty good power bat. Max Muncy from the Dodgers, 5.3 WAR since 2024. And then Ryan O'Hearn of the Orioles, 3.7 WAR since 2024. There are four guys right there who would have been worth way more than Jamer Candelario was in his time in Cincinnati, and they would have cost you even less than Jamer Candelario did. So I just think it's another terrible contract from this organization. We've seen it with Candelario, Mike Moustakas. As much as everyone loves Ken Griffey Jr. and what he did in Cincinnati, we were still paying him for his time in Cincinnati until like last year. Um, this organization just does not sign smart free agent contracts for whatever reason. And the last little bit of roster news is that Reese Hines was called back up from AAA, so he's back with the big league club. Um, Sort of the scuttlebutt around Reds country is that Hines has never really been given a fair shake at the big league level. This is in part because of his chase issues. He strikes out a ton, but he also has, incredible power upside, as we saw during that first week when he was called up last year. And he has a great arm in the outfield. There's some concerns with his fielding and his range, but his arm is really good. Like I said, most of the fan base feels that Hines deserves a longer look in the big leagues, um, especially because he's a right-handed bat that you can start against lefties, and you don't have to start a guy like Connor Joe against lefties. And he definitely has more upside than Connor Joe does. I also would like to see him get extended time at this level, to see if he can actually adjust to major league pitching. And be successful and cut down on his chase rate and cut down on the strikeouts. Can he make the adjustments he needs to, or is he really just a quad A guy? But the only way you're going to figure that out is if you give him enough playing time to, really build a decent scouting report on him.
Yeah, I think that going back to what you said about the free agents, these two organizations, the Reds and the Guardians, are really similar when it comes to the how they handle free agents. Now, I
Mhm.
don't think that the Indians and Guardians have had as many misses as the Reds, but I feel like the Reds are a little bit more aggressive in free agency. So it kind of balances out a little bit.
Right.
The Guardians getting Santana was a good free agent signing this year,
Mm,
especially with the concurrent trade of Naylor to Arizona, getting Saccone over to Cleveland, and Saccone has been really good this year. Um, but that's crazy that Max Muncy has was a cheaper contract than Jeimer Candelario. You
I
think
know.
of him as
I
like
was
a
shocked to see that.
yeah, that is actually crazy. But I'm kind of going back to the best free agent signing that Cleveland has had in like the last decade, I think was Encarnacion, and we signed him to
Right.
like a 2-year contract. So, um, but anyway, I'm gonna get into some of my takeaways from the week. I'm gonna start off with some roster updates. So not necessarily any trades or free agency signings or anything, but we have some more guys that are on their way back from injury. So that's definitely encouraging to see. We have Eric Sabrowski and Trevor Steffen making rehab appearances in Columbus. So those are two guys that are very much needed in the bullpen to sort of provide a little bit more depth. I really don't think that this team can continue to have Matt Festa pitching in high leverage situations as much. Matt Festa's fine, but he's not a leverage reliever quality of pitcher, and it really shows how little bullpen depth we have this year compared to last year. So Sabrowski is supposed to be back sometime in the next week or two, and then Trevor Stephan is supposed to be back sometime next month. So they're both on track with their progression and stuff. So that's good to see. Shane Bieber is playing catch again in Arizona, so he's on track to be back probably sometime next month, maybe around the All-Star break. So um, I'll get into it in a second, but this starting rotation is actually becoming pretty good, and I did not think I'd be saying that at the start of the season. Um, John Means, a guy that we haven't really talked about, or at least I haven't really talked about this year too much because he's come back from Tommy John surgery, but he's doing a his throwing progression in Arizona, and he should be back in August or September. So that's another guy that, to take into account with the starting rotation. So it's going to be really interesting to see what the starting rotation looks like. And I think the only kind of bit of bad news as far as injury goes is the Travis Bazzana situation. So he went down with a an oblique strain a few weeks ago. His timetable was 8 to 10 weeks, and there's really no updates on what Travis Bazzana's ETA is. So I really don't feel great about the Travis Bazzana situation, and I think that there's no way we're going to see Travis Bazzana this year. I think we would be lucky to see him by this time next year in the big leagues, but.
Hey, that hot take is gonna hit, so that's nice for you at
It's gonna
least.
hit. It's good for my ego, but I'd rather my ego get hit a little bit rather than
Yeah.
and at the Guardians for the Guardians to uh succeed from it. But anyway, yeah, starting pitching has been phenomenal. At least like the last week and a half, the starting pitching has had a sub 2 ERA. So since the Mariners series, the starters have pitched to a 194 ERA. Going back to Slade Cecconi's outing 2 starts ago, so Slade pitched 7 shutout innings last night. It was probably the best start we've had from a pitcher this whole season. He only threw 85 pitches in 7 innings, and he was just shutting the Athletics down. That was great to see. Slade Cecconi made a little tweak to his sinker, and the Athletics just didn't know what to do with it. They were hitting the ball on the ground, and he was getting really quick outs, and that's what you love to see from your starting pitching. So yeah, the starting pitching has been really hot. And so far this year, I haven't pulled up the stats from this year. The starters on this team throughout the season have pitched to a 4.03 ERA. I don't know how that ranks in the league, but I assume it's about middle of the pack. And shockingly, the relief pitchers have a 3.68 ERA, which is also around middle of the pack. So both the starting pitching and bullpen units have about a 1.36 whip. So the starters and relievers are actually pretty on par with each other this year, which I didn't think that the bullpen was going to take that big of a step back, but with how many injuries this bullpen has experienced, it definitely does make sense. So um, yeah, but long term, this Naylor trade is looking really good. Slade Cecconi in his last 4 starts has a 2.05 ERA. And then the night before that, Luis Ortiz threw 6 shutout innings and struck out 10 guys. That was amazing. The Guardians finally gave him a little bit of run support. And Luis Ortiz looks so much more comfortable on the mound when he actually gets run support. That was really the second time all season that the Guardians have given him, like more than 2 or 3 runs a game. And he just pitches so much better when his team is doing well behind him. And then a really frustrating game was game 1 of the Athletics series. Tanner Bybee threw a complete game in 8 innings on Friday night, and the Guardians lost 5-1. And that's probably when, as a fan, I was kind of at my lowest point because this team just cannot catch a break. I watched the whole game, and Tanner was just getting so unlucky with how the A's were just hitting the ball and the calls that the umpires were making and stuff, and nothing was. And then Denzel Clark made the most heroic catch I've ever seen in the outfield. He made multiple catches this past weekend where the Guardians would have had extra bases and it would have completely changed the game. And then the Athletics were just they formed nine gold glovers this weekend, unsurprisingly. So that's kind of been the theme of the season. But that was great to take 2 out of 3 in Sacramento. So even though, Tanner gave up 5 runs on Friday night, he gave up 4 earned runs and he looked really good. Um, yeah, like I said, he was kind of giving up soft contact and yeah, he looked really good. So, um, and I kind of came to the conclusion, this is the most, I wouldn't say that this is the best that the starting rotation has been in 7 years, but I would say that this is the most talent that this team has had starting pitching wise since probably about 2018 or 2019. They had those years they had Kluber, Bauer, Carrasco, Mike Clevenger, and I think they had Danny Salazar. Josh Tomlin was another one, but
Mm.
they had 1 to 5 was absolutely stacked, and um, each pitcher kind of has a unique quality about them that makes them that makes their ceiling so high. So. Ortiz just has filthy stuff. He throws 98 and gets 20 plus inches a run on a sinker, and his off speed is filthy as well. When he is able to control the ball, he is absolutely filthy, and you can't really hit him. Um, Gavin Williams is kind of gives me like a Spencer Strider type where if he just limits that one blow up inning per start, he can, he has like I said, his windup kind of gives me Spencer Strider vibes, and if he's able to throw about 100, and he could really control the ball super well when he's throwing 96, 97. So Gavin Williams has elite extension and he has elite velocity on his fastball. So if he could just limit the walks and limit the bad innings, then he'll definitely be a really good starter. Tanner Bybee has an ace pedigree. He looks to kind of slowly be getting back to where he was last year and a couple years ago when he was at his best. But he's just had pretty bad luck this year, and I think that they should start to be working in his favor again because he's doing the right things. So I've liked what I've seen from Tanner Bybee recently, even though the results haven't really been there. Um, I talked about Slate Cecconi already. His ceiling is incredibly high. I think that it's a small sample size, but just the incremental improvements that he's made throughout the season, coming from being a 6+ career ERA pitcher in Arizona to now being throwing to a 2 ERA in his last 4 starts and just blowing guys away with his sinker. It's really cool to see, and the Guardians really found something in him. And then Logan Allen, when his command is working for him, he could be a tough pitcher with, going soft away and then jamming guys in with a, 91, 92 mile an hour fastball. That could be really effective when you are able to locate the ball. And it's just a matter of Logan Allen having his stuff and limiting those walks and stuff because he doesn't really give up that much hard contact for his as kind of soft as he throws. And like I said, they'll have Shane Bieber back, so they'll be at a bit of a crossroads with what to do with this rotation. I feel like right now we have 5 guys that genuinely deserve to be in the starting rotation. So I like what I'm seeing from the starting pitching staff. Um, Now kind of moving on to the offense side of things, it's just a complete 180. I've just seen some really alarming things from this lineup, and even though the Guardians have won 2 consecutive series, the starting pitching has kind of bailed them out. So the Guardians have only scored 4 more runs in 2 games in the month of June. It's June 23rd as we're recording this, and they've only scored 5 or more runs once this whole month, and that was the game where they blew out Cincinnati 11-2. So um, all other games they've scored, 4 runs or less. That's really bad. Um, the last 2 games, even though they scored, 4 runs on Saturday and 3 runs on Sunday, offense looked a little bit better. It looked like they had a little bit more life to them. Um, Yeah, like I said last week, this team just looked beat down from all the bad luck they've kind of experienced this season. There's still a lot of bad luck this weekend, but something's got to give at some point. Um, Another kind of frustration I've been seeing with the lineup, and this is a little bit more lineup construction gripe that I have, but I don't know why we're batting David Fry cleanup. I realize that his ceiling is, all-star David Fry level last year, but he is not at that level right now with how comfortable he looks at the plate. And he needs some time to ease himself back in. I think he needs a little bit more playing time, and I understand that you can't really give him much playing time when he's not able to play in the field, and you have Santana and Manzardo who are kind of switching off DHing, but I really think that David Fry should at least be lower in the lineup when he is put in the lineup. I don't know how many more times I can watch David Fry strike out in a big situation. And to his credit, he's had some he's had some pretty high leverage hits this season, but he's just too inconsistent right now, and I don't really blame it on him. It's just the fact that he's so far behind the curve on his progression for the season. So it kind of sucks to see that they're batting him cleanup and just throwing him to the wolves like that. But then again, he is, like 30 years old, and he does have a lot of big league experience, so I do understand it. But yeah, it's just I just don't like the options that we have as far as a cleanup hitter goes, besides Santana. I think a lot of buzz about what this team is going to do for outfield too revolves around Chase DeLauter. So Chase DeLauter, I've talked about him before. He was a first round draft pick 3 years ago. He got injured at the beginning of the season, and he's finally healthy again, and he's doing really well in AAA. Now, in AAA, it's to be taken with a grain of salt because Columbus is such a hitter-friendly park, but he does have an 882 OPS in 29 games for the Clippers this season. And Jonathan Rodriguez, who's really stunk it up this year in the big leagues, had a 902 OPS in 46 games in AAA this season. So it's really hard to tell if Chase DeLauter is going to transfer to the big leagues, but I have a little bit more faith in Chase DeLauter than I do in Rodriguez because Rodriguez's approach just doesn't really work in the big leagues. He's like a diet Giancarlo Noel. He has a little bit better approach at the plate, and he doesn't have quite as much power. So that's what I think about Jonathan Rodriguez. He just is not the long-term answer in right field. He's not a very good fielder. Granted, Chase DeLauter isn't that great a fielder either, but I like DeLauter's potential a lot better. Um, but yeah, this offense just needs to play better. That's kind of my conclusion for this week. We can't keep relying on the starting pitchers to, go six or more innings with, uh, one or two runs allowed, throwing a shutout, something like that. Um, I'm cautiously optimistic about the Guardians right now. I think that there are still some really glaring issues offensively, but I really like what I'm seeing starting pitching wise, and bullpen I'm kind of lukewarm to right now. So I'm glad that we're at least getting some guys back. So without further ado, I think we'll get into our around the league segment right now. So we have some beef with the Dodgers and Padres. So Jane, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so the Dodgers and Padres played last week, 3 game set. And these are two teams that have had a history of disliking each other, and there's definitely a rivalry there. But a couple of guys get hit. Tatis gets hit. Otani gets hit a couple times. Guys get thrown at. Bench is clear. Um, and when bench is clear these days, it doesn't mean anything. Everyone just comes out of the dugout, and the bullpen guys have to run all the way in from the outfield, which sucks for them. And they all just stand there and sort of yell at each other. And there's an imaginary line drawn on the field that no one can cross. And I think we, as a podcast, we need to take a stance. And so I'm putting it out there that it's our official stance that we need to bring back baseball fights. Like I said, there are no fights in baseball anymore. Um, I think it's our stance. It needs to be our stance that guys need to start throwing punches. Let's really fight. The last good baseball fight that I can remember was Jose versus Tim Anderson, and Tom Hamilton made a great call on that.
I was thinking the same exact situation. So
Yeah, yeah, that one, and then the Amir Garrett fighting the entire Pirates dugout
yeah,
is another
that
really
was
good one from
hilarious.
recent memory. Um, but the old baseball fights were so cool. The old Yankees Red Sox fights. There's the iconic Robin Ventura, like 20-year-old Robin Ventura charges 40-year-old Nolan Ryan, and Nolan Ryan puts him in a headlock and just gets three or four good punches in.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Um, Baseball fights used to be really cool, and it was part of the quirk of our sport. Um, and we don't really see that a lot anymore. Um, which I kind of hate.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the reason behind that is just because everybody in the league is just so friendly with each other now. You have
Yeah,
guys in the off season that work out with guys from other teams, and
right,
um, there's really a tight-knit community around Major League Baseball, it seems, which is good. It's
right,
good
right.
for, marketing and stuff, but at the same time, the integrity of the sport is I sound so old when I say that, but yeah, we don't get any of those vintage fights anymore. So,
Yeah,
um,
I'm wondering if we need to, like, every team just needs sort of an enforcer like hockey teams have, just a guy that you throw out there just to fight, basically. I think, just
that'd be awesome.
put a guy in the bullpen who can pitch to the tune of like a 4 ERA. He's not really great. You don't really use him that often, but when you want to throw at someone and fight, he comes out there and does that and gets tossed and suspended for a couple games.
Yeah, I think the guy that comes to mind when you talk about that is Derek Dietrich. You
Yeah,
know,
Derek Dietrich or like
like
an Amir Garrett, someone like that.
yeah,
They're just out there to fight, basically.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
So yeah, and then we also have something about an MVP candidate in Cal Raleigh, the Mariners. So
yeah. This caught my eye. He has the most homers before the All-Star game of any catcher. He passed Johnny Bench a couple of days ago to do that. So that catches my eye because anytime I see Johnny Bench mentioned, you're in really good company. Um, I think you have it here that he definitely deserves some MVP consideration.
mhm.
With his glove, being a catcher and producing at the elite level that he is. It's not often that you see catchers produce at the offensive level that he is producing at. Um, and all while doing that as a catcher is super impressive.
Yeah, I watched a random catcher ranking like I don't know, a couple days ago, and Bo
Hmm.
Naylor was like middle of the pack. And you think of like, Bo Naylor has like a 700 OPS this year. He's
Right.
pretty bang average when it comes to his offense output. And he has like a 170 average. But anyway, good on
Yeah.
base percentage. But anyway, yeah, you just don't think of Bo Naylor being like an above average catcher in the MLB
Right.
hitting like that. And then Cal Raleigh has an over 1,000 OPS and is giving Aaron Judge a run for his money as far
Yeah.
as offensive output goes. I think he's had a better offensive season than Shohei Ohtani so far
I
this year,
believe so.
if I'm
Yeah.
not
I believe the
mistaken.
stats
Yeah, that
would
is
suggest that.
crazy.
Yeah.
And the catchers do so much nowadays too with
Hmm.
with how much film they study and how much they're asked to do with like pitch comm and stuff. The catchers really have so much more in their plates now with just like yeah, just managing a pitching staff and with how much tape is out there on
Right.
everybody. So super impressive to see. So um next, I have something about the Rays Devil Magic coming
Hmm.
back. So I was looking at the MLB standings yesterday, and it was kind of a jump scare to see the Rays were second in the AL East, 2.5 games behind the Yankees. This is really not a team that I thought was going to be in contention this year. They
Yeah.
have the second best. Well, okay, so they're in the first wild card spot. They have um they have like the fourth or fifth best record in the American League, and
Right.
nobody has been talking about them this year. They've just been quietly, doing their thing.
Hmm.
I think Junior Caminero is going to hit 30 plus home runs this year. He's really had a breakout season for the Rays. Um, Yandy Diaz has been doing this thing. He's one of those players we talk about is like kind of boring just because he does kind of the same thing every season, and
Right.
you can just rely on Yanni Diaz being really good. And then Josh Lowe and Brandon Lau are also doing their thing this year. Brandon Lau is he should probably get some consideration for an all-star bid for second base. And then
Yeah.
as we said a week or two ago, Jonathan Aranda should probably get the start at first base for the American League.
Hmm.
They also have two really good pitchers at the top of their starting pitching staff. So Ryan Pepio has about a three flat ERA, and then Drew Rasmussen has a 2.6 ERA. So um, yeah, their pitching factory is alive and well. And yeah, the Rays, the Rays are I don't hate them. They're a good team to root for, and I definitely I definitely would like to see them win that AL East in favor of the Yankees. So
Yeah,
um,
definitely. And I think, too, with the Rays, they're sort of one of those teams that um they do this every, couple years. They sneak up on you.
yeah.
They never really have the big names. They are sort of a team that has built their success and their franchise around, trading guys away and just constantly replenishing the farm system and um, you know, they're good every couple years because of that. They're never really that bad. They're probably one of the best examples of a small market team being run really well. I'd say it's the Rays, the Guardians, and the Brewers are the three that come to mind when you think of smaller market teams that are always pretty competitive. So we are surprised by this, I think, but I don't necessarily think we should be. But I feel like that's just the way the Rays do it.
Yeah, for sure. They really do sneak up on you every year. So that'll
Yeah,
be an interesting division race to watch this year. I don't know how long the Rays are going to be in it for, but they're definitely very well in it now. And the Yankees have been slumping recently. So
yeah,
maybe, the Yankees have a really good roster. So I still think that the Yankees are the heavy favorites in that division, but it'll be interesting to see what they do down the stretch. So.
yeah,
Um,
for sure.
Next, we have something about Jacob Mizorowski of the Brewers. Um, so yeah, let's
Yeah, I
get
can get
that.
into this one. It's just another like sort of really good pitcher developed by the Brewers organization. They have a bit of a pitching lab up there in Milwaukee, which I don't really like to see, but kudos to them because they seem to be able to pump out pitchers like this all the time. Mizorowski, I think, was a top prospect for them, but I'm not entirely sure where he was ranked or anything like that. He went five no-hit innings in his debut, and then in his second start, he took a perfect game into the seventh. So he threw 11 no-hit innings to start his career, which I believe is a record.
Yeah,
Um,
that's insane.
yeah, he has a 1.64 ERA in those 11 innings, a whip of 0.545. The FIP is 3.62, but like we've talked about before, FIP is can be an imperfect stat because it takes out sort of what the pitcher can't control. So, or it takes out like his defense and things like that. And if a guy pitches to some contact, the FIP can look inflated. Baseball Savant has his expected ERA at 1.84, which is probably a better stat in terms of expected performance. So, the expected ERA really is not that much higher than his actual ERA. I was looking at his Savant page earlier today. He has a three-quarter arm angle. He averages 99.6 on his fastball and 94.5 on his slider, which is just an insane velocity to throw a slider at.
Yeah,
Um,
that's disgusting.
yeah. He's 6'7", so he gets great extension, sort of that prototypical lanky pitcher. Um, Sort of like a right-handed Chris Sale, or for Reds fans, like a right-handed Nick Lodolo, just super long and lanky on the mound. Um, I mean, it's a small sample size of 84 pitches, but his fastball, no one has a hit on his fastball this season. I mean, he's only thrown it 84 times, but still, that's pretty impressive. And like I said, it's a small sample size, so it's tough to say if he's going to continue to see this elite level success or, if it's a case of guys just not having enough tape on him yet. Um, I'm hoping that it's the latter because, I don't want the Reds to have to see them and be dominated by another Brewer pitcher. Because I'm pretty tired of watching that. Um, but yeah, do you have any thoughts on him?
Yeah, so for scouting, he had an 80 grade fastball, which if you don't know, scouting grades, 80 is the highest you can go. So that is like elite of the elite. Very, very few pitchers have 80 grade anything. I'm not sure what Paul Skeens had when he was coming up, but I don't even know if Paul Skeens had any 80 grade attributes when he came up to the big leagues. But I just think his fastball is really good. If you're a
Yeah.
Guardians fan, you think of Kate Smith, the how much extension he gets. Kate Smith only throws I say only, but he throws his fastball about 97, 98 miles per hour, but it plays up to about, like 101, 102, just because of
Mhm.
he gets elite extension. And um, imagine facing Kate Smith for like 6 or 7 innings with probably a better fastball and 95-mile-an-hour slider, which is absolutely unreal. And then
Yeah.
yeah, just those two pitches alone make a great reliever.
Yep.
And you have a guy who can who has reliever type of stuff and can sustain that for like 6 or 7 innings. So um, yeah, I just think he's really good. Um,
Definitely.
so. Um, I think that's where we're going to end out our episode today. So, um, thank you for listening and check us out on YouTube if you haven't already. Just make sure to subscribe. Make sure to play this as much as you can. If you're finishing the podcast on Spotify, go to YouTube and listen to it or watch it. If you've done both, then play it over again. Play it on silent, do something like that, share with your friends, share with your family. Um, happy to have you guys listening to us. So we will see you next
Yeah.
week for episode 23.
Thanks for listening. See ya.